Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back. Happy 4th of July weekend almost. Hope I hope we get good weather. And honestly, that's all I'm asking for the next few days is to be able to actually go outside next Monday. But it's Louisiana, it's summer. It's probably not going to happen. But anyway, so today, what I want to talk about is something along the lines of teacher-made assessments. We've been speaking a lot about assessment in general, analysis of assessment, decision-making, but we haven't really spoken about creating our own assessments. What goes into that? What are some of the pros and cons? What are things that we need to look for? What are things that we need to consider as we are developing any sort of assessment tool for ourselves to be used or to use in classrooms? And when we think about creating our own assessments, I don't want us to limit ourselves to the concept of like a unit test or concept test or assessment, but rather I want us to really be thinking all the way down from assessment of a skill all the way up to the concepts that go into the assessment of diagnosis. The same themes apply across. So I want us to be able to think both in very narrow and very broad terms about why assessments ask the questions that they do, and then or present the material that they present, and how we as individuals, clinicians, teachers, diagnosticians can use that same concept to develop our own assessments. Now, on the diagnostician side, you are obviously not making up your own diagnostic assessments, but there are still going to be opportunities that you have to ask series of questions with the purpose of assessment that come up on the spot. You want to dive deeper into a particular skill, you have to figure out what you can ask or what you can present in meaningful ways that is going to give you information about your student that you can actually use. So when we think of teacher-made assessments, the first things that come to mind for me, I'll give both a clinical example and a classroom example. Classroom example, the first thing that comes to mind for me is something like an exit ticket. End of day, end of unit, end of concept check of student knowledge. One or two questions or a few questions that should give you a good understanding of what goes into or of where the student stands with respect to a particular concept. For clinical, when I think of assessment, of teacher-made assessment, what I am really thinking of is kind of in between the skill assessment that is on something like the LCAR or the ABLS or the CPERC or the BB-MAP and the intervention skills themselves. So when we are testing a battery of skills, I want to give you 25 math problems or 15 community helpers and see how many you know, those types of things, where it's more than what's on the assessment, but less that's in the actual instruction. And in both of these scenarios, we're kind of in the same place, right? We're not giving this larger concept assessment. We're not instructing, but the teacher assessment or the teacher-made assessment fits into this space in between. And as we've spoken before, these are often the results of these types of assessments oftentimes give us high quality in the moment decision-making opportunities for us to decide what to do next. What type of materials, what type of programs do we go on? Do we stop and revisit material? So what we ask here has a pretty huge impact on our instructional sequence. Given that, does everyone follow what I'm saying so far? That makes sense? So given that importance that can rely on those assessment questions, we don't have curriculum-made questions to ask. We don't have what we know to be valid materials and valid questions to make those types of decisions. That's a major gap in, I don't want to say pre-made instructional material, but in the assessment repertoire. So I have a validated pre-test, post-test, whether it's a unit test or a diagnostic test or an assessment. And all the instructional decisions that I have to make to get from A to B, I have to make those up on my own. And largely, those are the decisions that are going to determine our success in instruction. So what are we looking for when we make our own assessment questions or materials or thoughts? What are we looking for when we start to think about how do I, in the moment, not big concept wise, not quite individual skill wise, but in that middle space, what do I look for? How do I know how or what to assess? That's a big thought. I don't know if, I hope everyone is seeing where I'm going with this. What are your thoughts? I'm teaching a math skill. I'm teaching addition. Keep it real simple. I've taught big lesson, and it's maybe second grade, double-digit addition. I'm giving an exit ticket. I'm giving, I'm assessing to see if they've got this skill, not the concept of addition, not the bigger piece, but just the skill. And I got to do this in a quick way to know what to do. What questions do I ask? How many questions do I ask? How do I know? What am I looking for so that I know what I'm going to do tomorrow?
Hi, Dr. Shaman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Cece.
I was thinking the I don't know, the typical WH questions, like what, who, where, when, how. That maybe that's too practical or too easy, but that's what I thought.
So I think that, those are a skill in and of itself to be assessed through teacher assessment, and that concept applies. But what am I asking? What am I asking? How? Let's stick to this math concept because it's concrete. How am I going to know at the end of these few questions that I asked, at the end of this exit ticket, whether or not my students are ready to move on, and that I trust that decision is valid? Give me an example. Let's do it this way. I'm gonna put my whiteboard up. Give me an example of a question that I can ask to assess double-digit addition as a teacher-made test.
12 plus 25.
Thank you, Allison. All right. So this is one question that I, as a teacher, have come up with to assess whether or not my child is ready to move on. Is this enough to get this right? Does my child have double-digit addition?
No, because we didn't do any regrouping or anything. Like,
Okay, good. So what's another question that I can ask?
then you can do 27 plus 19.
All right. Good. What about now? Do we have enough? Heather says no. Allison says no. Why not? We have a chat. Chat is open. They show their work. Probably want to do that anyway. What other questions? So not even getting into that. What other questions? Why isn't this enough?
You probably said this, but like, I don't know the objective of the lesson to be able to tell me like if that's enough or not. Because like if I just want to know, can they regroup, then maybe yeah, but then I don't know what the lesson objective was.
All right, awesome. I very much appreciate that. Number one, we have to start with the lesson objective. Very good. Let's assume that it's regrouping all double-digit addition whose sums are within 100.
For me, I guess if within 3 problems, if they got it right, they showed their work, then I would say I could probably add the next layer.
Okay. Why 3 problems? Where is that coming from for you?
Just to make sure they're not guessing, or they don't, maybe they know like the single digits and they were able to guess, but I don't know, maybe that's the wrong thing, but I would say that they can't guess 3 or more, but 2, maybe they would get lucky and guess.
Okay. So let's come up with a third problem that's going to help us assess.
Or like I only stuck with things in the 20s and the teens,
Okay.
using some higher numbers.
Okay. Give me an example.
You said it had to stay under 100, the answer.
Yes.
Would you want to see if they can add the third number to the answer? Like if it was 99, I don't know. I just don't feel like an assessment like this would show very much until you get to the next level, I guess.
So what would you want to see? So first of all, hang on. So Allison, give me an example of what you would want. What's one more that you would want to get there?
So
And how to be thinking of the answer to what you would want to see.
66 plus 32.
Ooh, cool. I like that, Selena. 66 plus 32. All right. 98. Selena has helped them create their own problem and solve. I like that a lot. Okay. Heather, what about you? Come on, you got it.
I don't know much about exit tickets or any of that kind of stuff.
But think about so a way to think about it for you is, what is the type of problem set that you would want to ask?
Like to see if they could go on to a next skill.
Yeah.
Maybe. Well, that would be, I don't know.
So I think we have some good ones here, right?
Yeah.
So Selena, what I don't want, I like where you're going with it, but and I really like to have them create their own problem and solve. But Allison, I think the thought process that you have here is the right thought process. What you're looking for are the different combinations of skills that are enough problems to get the different combination of skills so that you have covered all of what we're going to call the critical attributes of the objective. All the things that make the objective the objective. So yeah, it's possible that create and solve your own problem is outside the scope of the objective, and maybe that is the next objective, right? Like that's a higher order skill than simply solving it, but that could definitely be in there. I think, Allison, what you've outlined here of no regrouping in the ones. We can't regroup in the tens, right? Because we're within 100. We have lower numbers. We have higher numbers. There's one other type of question that I would probably want to see here. That's the opposite of what you did here, which is single digit numbers, right? So you have a double digit addition problem, but single digit numbers. So you have 39 plus 6. And can we do that? Okay. So if it's all addition within 100. Obviously, if we're going above 100, then we would want to see, or addends under 100, but within 200, we would want to see regrouping above in the tens column, and regrouping in both, right? So what we're really looking for here are all the different permutations that are going to allow us to say that we have covered the different components of the objective. Now, in this scenario where we are creating our own, let's say we've gotten all our different types of problems, what is enough? What is enough for assessment? Selena had mentioned like enough so that they can't guess it, right? You have to have that consistency. Can we determine that? Without, big assessment tools behind us, can we determine that?
I think it differs skill to skill, like how many problems per, like, but you want to have enough, I don't know.
You guys know that sometimes I try and trap you. This is not a try and trap you type of question. I don't think that there is an answer. I think there are things that we can do to occasion confidence in our results. Selena, I like your show their work. If you can show me your work, I probably need fewer questions because I have some insight into your thought process. And I know you didn't guess. Even if it's something as simple as that's showing your work and showing me that you are with intentionality saying 10, 20, 30, 7, well, partial sums, 37. If you show me this, I have a lot of confidence that you would be able to replicate that with any type of problem. Same thing over here, show your work, 1, 2, and my 7 dots, 1 and my 9 dots. And if you can show me that this equals 16 and I bring that over, something along those lines, I can have confidence that that is a replicable process. You're not relying on math fact fluency. You're not relying on lucky guesses. You are showing me that you have that understanding of the skills. So there's a lot of value in that show your work, right? The more insight, what we are trying to do is occasion problems or a problem set or a question set that is going to be able to give us that level of confidence. All right. What about in ELA? What about an ELA type question? Let's see. Hang on, give me a second. Lena, your point of objective was very well taken. Now my internet freezes, of course. No, PDF goes away. No PDFs. I'm pulling a standard so I can create an objective from that. All right. See how well this copies. This is my standard. All right. My objective is going to be given a 3rd grade story. Student will be able to identify 3 character traits and identify how one of these traits contributes to, or one how do I want to say it? To an event in the story, something along those lines. So we've talked about character traits. We've talked about how how who characters are has an impact on what happens in a story. How do I assess this at the end of the day? How do I have an understanding of that my child understands this? And this is at random chosen. I don't know if it's the best example or not, but that's what we were working with, right? Take a couple of minutes and think of a question, a couple of questions, what you might do as your assessment for this kind of objective, standard and objective. All right, sound good? 2 minutes, go. Pause. Okay, so we have a whole bunch of different options here. Good. Okay. So I like Heather. You're already the exit ticket concept, which is not familiar to you. I love that that's there. And the reason that I think that that is so important, I'm actually gonna post these in the main chat, because I realized that the chat box doesn't show up in the recording. So there's one, there's another. Here's mine. Have good. All right. So I think I got all of them. If I missed any, I'm sorry. So let's take a look at each of these. Pick one character from the story because of Winn-Dixie and name 3 traits of this character. All right, so that directly addresses our objective, our overall objective, right? Explain how one of these traits leads to Winn-Dixie finding his way home. Good. So here you're saying find the traits and explain how this it is impacted or impacts a specific event, right? So we're just taking the objective as it is and plugging in the current content. And I think that that is a totally applicable way of doing this. What are some pros to that, and what are some limitations to that, Allison? What do you think?
I guess I had a student in 3rd grade this year, and I know they read.
I figured that was like right there for you.
But I know, like, I see that, okay, they're all reading this story together, so they're going over these, and that's the book that the teacher is using to teach the skills. So one limitation would be like, it's already a familiar story that they're talking about a lot. So
I think that that's absolutely correct. And in many cases, I don't want to say all cases, but in many cases, when we do these types of assessments, we want to be able to present untaught material, right? We want, otherwise we're just assessing directly what has been taught. There is no assessment for generality, for generalization, for extrapolation of skills. So I think that, if you look at Heather's and mine, where Heather says 5 short stories, I have given the following passage, having that novelty be a part of your assessment, I think is really, really valuable. And it's in that situation, you're starting to show that you understand that the story is not the skill.
Mm-hmm.
The skill exists, the objective exists independent of the materials that you use to teach the skill. When we had those math problems, those weren't the math problems that we taught with. Those were other math problems, specifically probably that we did not teach. So it isn't just memorization of what has been spoken about. Good. What do you like about this one, about your own that you have here?
I guess that it's specific on, it covers all the things in the objective.
Yep.
You pick a character, you name 3 traits. And I guess I'm thinking more of students who do struggle. So it's kind of leading them, like it gives the event. It's not even like they don't have to think of the event. It gives the specific.
Good. And I like, I'm actually thinking on a bigger scale, if we had a little bit more time for our exit ticket assessment process, combining yours with something like mine, I think would be super valuable, because you want to make sure that your students can at least do this. if they can't do this, they're definitely not doing the higher level one, right? So there's a lot of value to that. Good, good. All right, let's take a look at Heather's really quick. So, and Heather coming at this from more of the clinical's perspective, and I really, really value that here because it's going to show something very different. So 5 short stories that include characters with descriptions, a question of each component of the objective per story. This will give baseline and determine whether the student has the skill or needs an intervention. So 5 short stories that include characters with descriptions, a question of each component of the objective per story. Got it. So what you're saying is that you're not going to give like a standalone assessment, but rather when they can do this multiple times over different stories, that is your assessment in and of itself, correct? Yeah, and that's a different, obviously a different paradigm than what you're looking at in a classroom, but I think that paradigm is actually super important because what you're doing is you're using the mastery of the skill in instruction as the assessment in and of itself. And when we teach to that mastery level, we have more ability to do that. What you've done here though, is you've ensured that, or you're trying to ensure that your instructional materials allow for assessment across the different components of the objective, correct? I know I'm putting a lot of words in your mouth, but is that
Yes,
kind of
mainly because we've run into a lot of issues where we have these programs and people are reading, or the clients are reading stories to themselves, and the books or stories do not have the components to be able to answer these questions. I think that's where you were going.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I have, and it's probably not that embarrassing, but it's embarrassing to me because I thought that I was a pretty good teacher. But I was in a pinch one day and had not prepped a short story for my kiddos. And I had a lesson, I want to say was based on character. And yes, the book that I picked up had characters in it, obviously, but the focus of the book was very much not character. And the characters did not develop. There was nothing special about them. They didn't do anything. It was all like problem solving. And we read the story, and in a pinch, I had to flip the questions just so that the students got something meaningful to think about. I got nothing for the objective that I was actually looking at. So you absolutely have to make sure that the materials that you have are covering all of the different components of that objective, especially if you're going to use that as mastery. How many times, and Allison, I know that you can probably speak to this, do you read a section of a story and you have your lesson for the day and you're like, how did those two things just go together? And you have to try and like fudge it for your students. And I know in scripted curricula and scripted curricula for ELA in particular, like that kind of disconnect can happen because it just doesn't really follow in full, right? Good. Okay. Selena, let's look at yours. What is one character trait about blank that led to the problem in the story? Okay. I think very similar to Allison's here, you're covering the components of the objective. It's straightforward, it's direct, but same question for you. What are some pros, what are some cons of this kind of like straightforward, direct assessment?
I would say like some cons is like mentally I'm stuck on the how do their actions contribute to the sequence of events. I never taught 3rd grade. I didn't teach elementary. I taught high school. So I'm just stuck on explain how their actions contribute to the sequence of events. So I'm Googling sequence of events to see what that's talking about. And then it's like problem, climax, and then resolution. So then I'm trying to think of a story that has a problem, a climax, and then a resolution. So I'm like, I can't remember that. So that's like, because I know most of the third grade stories, they try to teach a moral, and then they try to teach you like character traits, you know, how does it progress, and what about the traits help them to solve the problem. So I couldn't think of a story that was like that off the top of my head. So that's definitely a problem. Then while everybody's talking, like if you're gonna have it be like an exit ticket type thing and you're teaching kids that are not on the same reading level, like how do you, like if I'm really trying to assess character traits and how it helps to solve like the you know, the flow of the story, I have to pick something that's like a high, medium, and a low. And then I'm like, well, I can't do all that because that's crazy too. This is just a quick assessment. So like, that's what I ended up with.
I think that thought process though, again, like that's what allows you to arrive at a question, right? It shouldn't just be something that is write it down here. Okay, good, you got it. You didn't. Good, you got it. You get it. You want to make sure that you have an understanding of who is going to get this and why, and what does that mean to the problem in the story. So Selena, if you were trying to use this as an exit ticket and you wanted to quote unquote control for the level of the student, the type of information they're getting, this type of thing, one thing that I would say is take a book that you're currently reading and then ask your question. So it doesn't have to be about a story that we're reading as a class. It doesn't have to be about a given passage. If you have a book in your book bag that's appropriately on your level, which all good teachers are going to have for their kids. So take something that I know you can read and I know you're understanding and that you're interested in. Give me one character trait, and one problem, and how are the two related? And I think that that's great. I think you can do a lot with something like this. I have no idea if this is the best example. Like I said, I just picked something literally out of the bucket. But that's where we're going with this. Okay, good. Mine. So given the following passage, so I'm providing a passage here, and I'm doing that so that I can control the information that is in the passage. And as I specified here, including character, traits, and events. Identify the main character, one trait about them, and identify one event that resulted because of that trait. All right, so I have a kid who is stubborn and he gets in trouble because he's stubborn. All right, now here is how I am testing for understanding as opposed, so I'll do that. Can they identify a character? Can they identify a trait? Can they identify how traits and events are related? But that might just be transcribing things that I see in the passage, right? And Allison, we talked about, you know, higher level, lower level before. To me, that's the lower level. Now I go to the higher level. Explain how that event might have been different if a different character were present. What are you guys' thoughts about that? Because that's vastly different. That second piece is vastly different than what you guys wrote. Is that too much? Is that too little? Is that what do you think?
I think it's definitely a higher order for those kids who can handle it, that you want to push them. It's a good way to see what they can do.
Good. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Is that too much for an exit ticket?
Maybe it could just be optional, like, well, usually if it's optional, they're not going to do it. But I guess you could just tell the kids, try your best, like,
Yeah.
and you're not actually grading that part of it, but seeing who can take it further.
Does it have enough to cover the objective in it as far as I guess the first piece, identifying 3 character traits, because it only asks for 1.
I agree. And I don't think it does. I don't think it does.
Because I think this
And-
specific objective is wanting 3 character traits and then them to choose from one that they already chose to identify. I don't know.
Say that again. Say that again.
It seems like this objective would be like they have to identify the 3 from one character, the 3 traits from one character, and then take one of those traits and tell why it contributed to the event of the story.
So if I change this to 3 because of one of those traits, is that better?
Yeah, I think that would cover it.
I think so too. I think so too. Now, why might I be putting this explain part in the exit ticket? Obviously, it's a higher order thinking skill. I want to be able to give those kids that that can do it the opportunity to do it.
To make sure they're problem solving as far as the pieces of the story. They're not just pulling things that they see in the story out.
Okay.
Being through
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Is that, think about how you would teach this objective. Do you think you might ask something like this throughout your instruction? If I'm just showing, here's the character, here's their trait as my lesson, as my instruction. Here's the character, here's the trait, and this event, and I'm drawing the line between that and the event. I'm not teaching the significance of that. To me, this probably would come straight out of my instruction. I know we're all thinking about this in different ways and obviously not trying to arrive at like one correct answer. But to me, I'm talking to my kids about like, why are these two things related? Why does it matter that my kid's stubborn? What would happen if he just said okay to everything? Would the problem occur? Would we have a story? Would it be interesting? Would, you know, you're talking about problems, climax resolution. If he just said yes, would we have a different problem? So I think this question actually becomes the bulk of my instruction. And that would allow, hopefully allow my students to think about what it is that we're truly trying to gain a significance from this story, which is, why do character traits matter? I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too hard about this. I just said what Selena just said. Cece, what do you think? What do you guys think?
Well, I don't know. I'm thinking. So is that part of comprehension though? Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, okay. And then generalization, or maybe, or like, are we trying, is that what, I'm not sure if like assessing comprehension, I guess I would have to know that they are able to comprehend or apply the correct context of the text in the narration or the story, or
Yeah, and I think that that's what you're trying to do by going beyond even just what the standard says, beyond what the objective says, but creating the significance of the context. That's missing in a lot of what we do, right? It's here's the thing you have to teach, but why? And why is that important? Selena, you were going to say something?
I was just thinking that for me, just like I know every teacher is different, I would have a hard time making a third grade question that would like one or two questions that would cover everything that this objective is asking. So just for me, like I would maybe have something a little bit more complicated on Friday, but then like smaller components as the week went on. I guess maybe thinking about it, that's a kind of where I was struggling to find an age appropriate question that would cover so many things, because we need to know if they understand the different roles of the characters, like motivations, feelings. You know, adults have trouble sometimes identifying how they feel, and then to identify that within other people, like a fictitious story, that could possibly be a skill. The sequence of events could be a skill, like, and then we're asking them to recall what they read. Also, the question's kind of asking them to draw a conclusion and infer at the same time, which that could also be a skill. So I think like this is like a whole unit, whereas like, you know, I would do it piece by piece.
So I love that. I think that that is absolutely great. And as you were saying, and I was like, that's spot on. Why don't we give the same passage Monday through Friday? And on Monday, we asked who the main character is. And on Tuesday, we say, identify a trait. And on Wednesday, we say, identify two more traits. And on Thursday, we say, explain how the trait is tied to an event in the story. And on Friday, we ask the whole thing. And we build with the same passage over the course of the week, right? And I think that what I hope you guys are seeing is that that in the moment assessment, that question that we have to come up with to get meaning out of it, is a lot more complex and needs to have a lot more thought behind it than this is what we taught. Let me just ask the same type of question. Good. I really like that. I really like that idea. What, Selena, for at the high school level, what are used for, like in this context that we're talking about, what do teachers use for that level of exit ticket, small assessment? Are they making their own things, or are those largely curriculum based? You know?
So this is my third, well, the next school year is going to be my third year out of the classroom, but the year that I did leave, there was a new science curriculum, and there was a lot of tears shed, and there was a lot of arguing over the assessments. Just looking at that standard, like it's re-traumatizing me, because there was a lot, like they gave us time to make assessments and questions, but it wasn't a lot of time. Like I don't even know what time we started, and look how much we talked about this one standard and objective, and they wanted us to make a whole entire test, or sometimes 3 tests in one afternoon, and they wanted, it was just a lot of craziness. But they did redo the curriculum. It was called phenomena-based learning. Do y'all know what that is? So in the science curriculum that they had changed to, phenomena-based learning was basically the state gave you this scenario, and then you had to teach the objectives through this random scenario. And then half of the struggle was the scenarios did not fit the objectives, which did not fit the test. But new teachers didn't realize that. They just wanted to get it done. Whereas I had been teaching a long time. I knew that. I saw it right away. But then they were like, "We'll just do it. Just give the test." And I was like,
Nope.
I can't do that. I can't mentally make myself teach something, test something that's totally different. That doesn't, if I'm not teaching what I'm supposed to be testing them, then what the heck am I doing?
So it was
a lot of craziness.
Inferential and inductive reasoning, yeah? The whole
Yeah,
thing.
so just an example, like the curriculum, the first standard was basically for the kids to understand the setup of the periodic table, how the columns and rows, how they have characteristics, like the elements, how the periodic table is arranged. The first phenomenon was the atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project. So getting that to figure in, trying to get the kids to understand the periodic table with using the atomic bomb. And I'm not a nuclear physicist, and neither are they. So it was just crazy. So I forgot your question now after all of that stuff.
Well, no, but now I'm thinking, how do you get from the atomic bomb to the periodic table at a high school level? Is that possible?
And there, so they did the whole unit. The state did a sample first unit, and all of their samples and lessons and stuff that they provided were all like historical based things. It was not anything about, they didn't even provide historical things about how the periodic table, about how the scientists, hundreds of years ago came up with their experiments and things like that. Like, it wasn't even things like that. It was basically what led up to the Manhattan Project and things like that.
So that's a good example of a bad curriculum.
Yeah.
And a bad assessment, and don't do that. But I do what the flip of that is teaching about the periodic table, teaching about the Manhattan Project, and being able to say what is one way understanding of the periodic table contributed to the development of the Manhattan Project. Like that's a stretch, but what you're looking for in these assessments, I'm trying to make a nice take-home point out of some craziness of this curriculum. I hope I never come across it. But being able to find that application, being able to find that generality, being able to find how the concept that we just learned has meaning outside of the content that we learned it in. That's what we're looking for. And all the while trying to ensure that we have all of our different components covered. It's rare that that is going to be an easy process. It's rare that is going to be done in a single question, right? Where one objective can be totally covered in that one question. But again, this is what we make our decisions on. This is the important piece. This is what allows us to determine, are we in a good place? End of thought. What do you guys think? What's your take home here? How? I don't even need to ask that. I don't even need to ask that yet. I'm actually going to put a little assignment up that's separate and apart from some of the other stuff. It's not going to be due on Tuesday. Just turn it in at your, or next Monday on the holiday. Turn it in at your leisure. But I want to give you guys an opportunity to look at a standard, write an objective related to that standard, and come up with a quick assessment for that objective. So take your time, think about it, use materials you already have. If you already have one that you like, that's fine. But I want to see where you guys' heads are at on something like this. Okay? So that will show up on Moodle soon. Any questions? All right. I will see you all next week. Have a good one.